Hey, team, we've got an absolutely fantastic show for you today because today we've got Brent Adamson on the show. And you know Brent, he's a world renowned author, speaker, sales researcher, trainer. Brent spent most of his career researching buying and selling in the B2B format. And some of that work's been published in books you know. With his pal Matt Dixon, he published The Challenger Sale back in 2011, then The Challenger Customer in 2015. And today we're talking to him about the Framemaking Sale, Sell More by Boosting Customer Confidence. And this is a book he's written with co-author Carl Schmidt. And it really appears to be a kind of an evolution from Challenger to sense making to frame making. And sense making was an HBR article that he wrote where he argued that modern B2B buyers are drowning in high quality information, yet they still struggle to make sense of it. And then back then he said the seller's job shifts from merely informing or persuading to helping buyers interpret, prioritize, and organize information so they can make confident decisions. The frame-making sale appears to push that idea even one step further, where the public positioning of the book is really about increasing buyer confidence in themselves, not to make the decision, not buyer confidence in the seller. We have this great conversation today. By the way, the book is terrific. So I always enjoy Brent's work. Lots of great research in there, some kind of scary stats where he does share that 75% of the time a buyer would actually prefer to make a decision without interacting with a salesperson at all. Yet 23% of the time, they have a high degree of regret for that decision. Of that group, the ones who make a decision without salespeople, they have a high degree of regret. So we talk about this concept he shares of a high quality, low regret decision and what's required to get there. We also talk about the challenges that are undermining customer confidence today and why it is so difficult for them to make a decision. We talk a lot about the fact that 40 to 60% of deals out there today that we think are qualified are going to get a no decision, meaning they didn't choose us, they didn't choose a competitor, they chose nobody. And again, this comes back to, in his view and Carl's view, an issue around supplier confidence in themselves to make the decision, not their confidence or trust in the salesperson. It's just a super interesting conversation today. Brent's always a really engaging guest on the show. And by the way, we do touch on AI today. So we've got Mike Sparling, our expert in the AI front, who's been joining for recent podcasts. So always a pleasure to have Mike as part of the show. Always a pleasure to have Mike as part of the show. And I really enjoyed today's conversation with both Mike and Brent. I'm sure you will too. And when you do, please like and subscribe to the Selling Raw podcast because it really matters to us. That's actually how we get great guests like Mike Sparling and Brent Adamson. Team, here's the show. Enjoy. Hey, Brent, welcome back to the podcast.
As always, Mark, it is great to be here. It's good to see you.
Well, it's great to see you. And by the way, team, we're joined by our pal, Mike Sparling again, known as our AI thought leader. So we love to bring Mike into these podcasts as a different filter because this series is going to be really focused a little bit on understanding where should we all be going with AI. Mike, it's great to see you again. Thanks for joining.
It's good to see you, Mark, and Brent. It's really great to meet you and spend the next little bit of time with you.
Agreed. Thanks, Mike.
So team, I think this is probably Brent's second or third appearance on our show over the last few years. We of course talked about the Challenger sale. The last time we brought him on, he'd done an article for HBR called Sense Making in Sales. So you see this progression from Challenger to sense making. I had the joy of reading his latest book, The Framemaking Sale, Sell More by Boosting Customer Confidence, that Brent wrote with his pal Carl Schmidt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I literally have read 300 sales books. I knew I was going to love this book. 20 pages in, 2 references, 1 Spinal Tap. So nobody has ever made a Spinal Tap reference in a sales book I've read. The second, Mike, this will
Well,
apply to
that's
you
a
and I.
shame.
By the way, this is why the sales profession's having such a challenge.
That's what I would call a missed opportunity right
Yeah.
there.
The second, I think you're the only person to quote Prime Minister Trudeau. So a Canadian prime minister is actually quoted in the first couple of chapters in the book,
Also true. Yeah.
talking about the pace.
Although
Justin
that quote is that quote has become, in fact, to be totally honest, it's a little embarrassing. I knew the quote before I knew it was Trudeau. I had to look it up. And say, oh, really? That was
Yeah.
Trudeau. But so it wasn't like I was writing, think I need a Canadian quote, but it was
Little maple washing to go with it.
That's going to change the whole tone of this podcast.
Well,
We
I-
thought
well,
you
I
were
even-
putting wind in our sails.
I know, Mark. Even more embarrassing is when you sent me the email and said, I really appreciate the Spinal Tap reference. My reaction was, really? I put a Spinal Tap reference in the book? I don't remember that. So was it the go to 11 bit? Was that what's in there? Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the senior sales leaders that you spoke to referenced, this one goes to 11.
By the way, I'm sorry, finish your thought. I apologize.
No,
I got all
you go
excited.
ahead, please.
There's something really interesting about that reference. So for those of you who don't know Spinal Tap, well, fix that. But there's a scene where he's bragging about his amplifier going not just to 10, but his goes to 11, right? And there's a big debate about is that actually meaningful or not. But it's actually really interesting in the world of research, in the world of sales books, in the world of actually Challenger and insight and ideas and framing. That joke, as funny as it is actually a perfect example of a really important idea of a difference in degree versus a difference in kind. And when you're out there trying to educate people, change the world, talk about ideas, help your customers understand their world in a different way, create insight, it's a really helpful sort of rubric to be thinking about, is this a difference in degree? Is it the same thing, just more? Or is it a difference, or less, I suppose? Or is it a different kind? It's something different altogether. And what you find is differences in degree versus difference in kinds have very different kinds of impact on things like mental models and change and emotional impact. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you may want to play one up versus the other, but it's a super helpful construct to be thinking about. And it's all captured in a Spinal Tap reference. There you go.
By the way, it's all captured in the book. Because
there you go,
one could argue, the whole frame-making sale is a difference in kind.
Exactly.
And it's kind of the provocative idea in the work where the real problem in sales not being buyer trust in a supplier, but it's the buyer's confidence in themselves to make a decision.
Yeah.
So when did you realize, because, back in the day with Challenger Sale, it was about teach, tailor, take control. It's about what I'm doing as a salesperson. Sense making with the HBR article from a couple of years back was, how do I navigate all of this high volume, high quality information that I'm getting buried with? Because it's all good, high quality, high volume of information. When did you navigate to, hey, the real problem is the Gardner spaghetti diagram of how buyers make decisions, which we've referenced on this podcast 20 times.
Yeah.
How did you get to this point? How did the research take you here?
It was a journey of many years. Some will know that the idea of buyer enablement that came out of our research shop at CEB when I think either right before or right after Gardner acquisition, the sense making work, kind of the same thing. That spaghetti chart, the spaghetti bowl of B2B buying, that is something I'll never forget. We were building a marketing study, actually. At the time, the marketing practice at CEB was headed by Martha Mathers, who's now a CM over at Bloomberg, is a good friend of mine. And we were building the storyboard, the pages that go along with sort of this idea that we're trying to portray as, like marketing, there's always, we need to sell the way customers buy and map the selling journey to the customer's buying journey. And the point we were trying to make is, what happens when the customers don't actually know their buying journey? What happens when the customer's buying journey is so messy that if you were to map to it, it'd actually be a bad thing, not a good thing, right? And so we were trying to figure out how to convey that graphically. And I looked at Martha and I said, what we need? We just need a sheet of paper, a page, a slide, with just circles and arrows and just, excuse my language, just crap going everywhere. Just like, we need something like just you look at and you viscerally think, it's like, and gotta love Martha Mathers. She went home on that weekend and on Sunday afternoon with her daughter and her dog on her couch, she drew that diagram. And we've tweaked it a little bit over the years, but that has been arguably one of the most famous, well-known, widely distributed images we've ever created in all the research. And it plays a central role in the frame-making sale in a lot of ways too, because it kind of picks up on this idea that B2B buying is broken. There's this really interesting moment, Mark, where it's like this moment of empathy in sales where, it's like, I think we'd all agree, at least look, since I've departed Gardner, I'm on my own. I've got a small company with my co-author. We're building around this new book, The Framemaking Sale. So I joke now what that means is there's only two of us. So I'm now both the head of sales and the sales team. What that really means is I'm just mad at myself for the no entries in the CRM system. Do you know what I mean? It's like, why is this in HubSpot? Oh,
That's an
sorry. It's like,
interesting
no,
one-on-one.
Challenging.
Yeah.
it's like, so I
Interesting
just hate
one-on-one.
it's one more reason to hate myself, I suppose, right? But where was this going? But the thing that we're also focused on is how hard selling is, right? And it is. It's fraught. It's difficult. It takes time. It's complex. It's confusing. But there's a moment in sales where I think everything begins to unlock when you actually stop and realize, wait a minute, it's arguably just as hard, if not harder, on the other side of the equation. It's not like,
Yes.
gosh, it's hard to like buyers know what they're doing, and we just have it's really hard to unlock that so that we can see their world too. It's rather no, they're struggling just as much, if not more. And this became clear and clear over the research years that we were doing the work. And there's a longer story. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on now, but
This is great. No,
there's
please.
a short answer. It's not even a short answer at this point, but it's an answer to your question because it's actually super interesting. And I will abbreviate a little bit. But over the course of, our research, we began to realize we're probably going to be more productive for the world if we study not so much the world of B2B selling or B2B marketing, but we begin to study the world of B2B buying and trying to understand what's really going on that side. This is a number of years ago when we first got into this. We actually reached out to a guy named Bob Mesta, who may have been on your show at some time. Do you know who Bob
Maybe,
is?
yeah.
Yeah. Bob Mesta, or Moesta, Mesta, was a partner with Clay Christensen, who's the author of The Innovator's Dilemma.
Yeah.
And Clay, I say Clay as if I knew him. I didn't. Rest in peace. But Christensen and Bob are best known for the work they, at least together, they're best known for the work they did on Jobs to be Done. So that's a Harvard Business Review article and became a model that's been widely distributed and used in sales and marketing. We actually reached out to Bob and asked him if we could talk to him about applying this idea of jobs to be done in the B2B space. And so that led to a really interesting collaboration for about a year and a half or so. Out of all that came one of these things that, the whole idea from Bob's perspective is you have to ask yourself, what are the jobs that customers are trying to complete to their satisfaction such that they will make a purchase decision? So we laid out these jobs, and this is the heart and soul of the spaghetti bowl. So working with Bob and doing some interviews and using his techniques, we went out and talked to B2B buyers. We identified these 4 buying jobs: problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, supplier selection. And the whole idea is a purchase happens when customers complete those jobs to their satisfaction. All that was super interesting, but it led to this really interesting question, which was, how does a customer know when they're done with a job, right? So if one of the critical jobs in making a purchase, feeling good about it, is problem identification, how do I know when I'm quote unquote done with the job, that the job's complete, that I've identified the right problem and the right scope and the right priorities? And what we began to realize is when I'd asked our research team, well, did you ask the customers you were interviewing about that? And the answer was always sort of vague, like, yeah, they just kind of feel it. It was like always really, and then you began to realize nobody's like, we're all kind of just like parenthood, right? We're all making it up, right? We're all like, none of us really knows how to be a parent. And I'm 20 years in. It's like, none of us really knows how to be a B2B buyer. And so that led to like, well, they're done when they feel kind of good that they're done, or they're confident they're done. And it's like, well, that's interesting. So we started taking this idea of confidence and breaking it into sort of component parts and then feeding these metrics of confidence into our research models. And the specific the research model is designed to identify the likelihood of what we call a high quality, low regret purchase, which you'll know because this is all laid out in chapter 1 of the book. But so we're trying to figure out what needs to happen inside of a sale or a purchase in order to increase the likelihood of customers buying a bigger deal with a broader scope, with a higher price point, and feeling good about it at the same time. And we took everything from Challenger, Teach, Tailor, Take Control, broke that into component elements, threw that in there. We took selling techniques and selling methodologies, marketing strategies. We even took buyer group configurations and number of stakeholders, all that. Anything and everything we could possibly think of, we put into this model and ran it to see what would happen. Lo and behold, by the way, Challenger actually had a really nice impact, which is like, oh, thank goodness. It's like Challenger, the increase particularly from Teach, Tailor, Take Control, the likelihood of a high quality purchase, a high quality, low regret purchase would go up by, say, 180% or something like that, which is almost like a 2x increase, which is really dramatic. And then we started taking this stuff from confidence and putting that into the model, and something completely bonkers happened. That's a very technical research term.
Yes,
which
we'll
was
look that up. That'll be
right.
in the
100%. Yeah,
Using the
bonkers
show
bonkers
notes.
to 11.
We'll define that in the show notes.
This, by the way, this is why I love doing research, because you find bonkers things, right? It's like this, like you look at things, well, that doesn't make any sense. And the thing that was really bonkers was the fact that these dimensions, particularly when you aggregated or synthesize them into sort of an overall metric, which we call decision confidence, it completely swamped everything else we studied, not just by a little bit. Like if, here's the technical version, if like, some things were here, maybe Challenger was here, this confidence metric was like literally off the screen. It was like up here. It was far and away bigger than anything else we'd ever studied. It was an order of magnitude larger. It was like, 9x, 10x improvement in this metric. And that led to this really interesting journey about, well, confidence in what? And it turns out that the degree to customers are confident in things like, did we even ask the right questions to begin with?
Yeah.
Have we done enough research? Have we thoroughly explored alternatives? And there's a longer story that no one cares about, but some of that research got turned into sense making over time. Some of that research got turned into buyer enablement, or those things were happening at the same time. Then Gardner came in, and Gardner kind of pushed us in some slightly different directions for all sorts of totally good reasons. But this work kind of sat around on the cutting room floor, and the more I thought about it, on the Gardner side, we kind of went in a different direction, which is like, how do I integrate sales and marketing, particularly based on that really amazing statistic we found right before I left, which is 75% of B2B buyers say they'd prefer to buy without ever talking to a sales rep at all. And so we got into like, well, how do I sell digitally if they don't want to talk to my people? And we just went in different directions. But since that time, it's always bothered me, or at least made me wonder, like, something about that for a minute, right? Particularly we put it in the context of, if 75% of B2B buyers don't want to talk to sales reps at all, and the number one thing that customers need to make purchases to feel confident, you start putting these things together, you start realizing, well, there's a couple things going on. First of all, the thing around confidence, the degree to customers are confident they ask the right questions, that they've done enough research, that they've thoroughly explored alternatives. When you start unpacking all that, Mark, what you realize is those dimensions of confidence are actually supplier agnostic. They have nothing to do with the supplier at all. So every time I present the confidence work to a CEO, it seems the first thing they'll do is agree and say, well, it's kind of no duh. If they're not confident, they're going to choose not to choose. But that's why they need to be confident in our product, in our people, in our value. And it's why we need to be trusted advisors. And you look at the data and say, no, that's actually not the story. The story is they need to be confident not in you, but in themselves. And it's always what's really led me to the book and everything we're doing now is this really interesting question. To your point, all the way circling back, this callback to the difference in degree versus difference in kind point. The difference in kind question here, the one that no one seems to be asking that I think is really critical based on this research is, what does it look like to engage customers in such a way that you're specifically solving for not their supplier perception, but for their self-perception? That's not something we've ever really talked about in sales before. It's always like, do you like my product? It's, selling is like a bad date, right? It's like, enough about me. Now you talk about me. Here's my product. Do you like my product? Right? It's like, here's my value. Do you like my value? Here's my ROI. Do you like my ROI? Here's me. Do you like me? And all this time, very much like on a date where you're worried about what your date thinks of you, and it turns out they're thinking about themselves. It's, and I don't mean that in a snarky way. It's like, we're all just kind of focused inward. And it turns out the same thing in B2B buying, not surprisingly, because we're still all just human beings. And so customers are worried about, are we even asking the right questions? Like in the world, and that's what I want to get to in a second, Mike, with this world of AI. It's like, have we done enough research? There's no end to research you can do in the world of AI now. We thoroughly explored alternatives. And by the way, those alternatives are changing rapidly now with AI supporting everything and moving quickly, right? And so what you find is, not only do customers need to be confident, but they're operating in an environment where that confidence is arguably more under threat than it ever has been in the past. They're struggling with decision complexity, all the different people involved. They're struggling with information overload, which is the sense-making work. They're struggling with outcome or objective misalignment, where all those different people are trying to just accomplish different things all in the right, with good intentions, but they are having a hard time just agreeing, not on how great you are, but agreeing on what they should even be doing in the first place. And they're also struggling, finally, the fourth one is with outcome uncertainty, which is, no, I see your value and I see what you've done with other companies. I've seen your success. That's great, but I'm just not sure we'll see it at our company because we're complex or we're different and we'll find some way to screw this up. So I'm confident in you and what you're saying. I'm just not confident in us. And so that becomes really interesting, which is, okay, we need to solve for customers' confidence in themselves. That confidence is under threat like never before. What a really interesting opportunity, all the way back to the 75% statistic. If 75% of B2B buyers would prefer never to talk to a sales rep at all, this becomes a really interesting opportunity, a really interesting question. Like, how do I become the one seller that customers do want to talk to? And I think the one way to become the seller that customers do want to talk to is to be the one that shows up and helps them feel better, not about you, but about themselves. And the best way for them to get you to become the trusted advisor, see if you guys buy this. I wish I had a bar chart on this, but I think
let's come back to that though. The how.
Okay.
Let's
All
come
right.
back to the how.
Okay. I'll take a breath. Well, that was a lot.
Let's take a everybody get the oxygen. Somebody send the oxygen to Brent's.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
we've
know.
got the
So
complimentary.
my extra large Chipotle Diet Coke's got
That'll
me all
do it.
amped up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it has the
yeah.
same impact.
That'll bring you back to earth.
That's
I'm
right.
gonna push it over because, Mike's not only a Canadian thought leader in AI, but he's also chief operating officer, chief technology officer of a large organization. So
Yeah,
he's on the receiving end of these. And
yeah,
I'd like to take that initial point where you say, hey, listen, let's go back to the spaghetti bowl diagram of Gardner.
yeah.
Mike, to challenge a little bit, one of the things that I've always believed, none of us ever have enough data to make the decisions. Brent, you're running a company now. I've run companies for years. Now I'm running my own company for the last
Yep,
15 years.
yep.
I never have enough data. I've got to make decisions. I'm really paid to use judgment to make decisions. Why is it so different in a large scale purchasing decision where people feel like they have to have every T crossed and every I dotted? At
Mm,
some point in time, you have to make a decision as an executive. You have to make a decision. I know there is a challenge there. Your old pal Matt Dixon wrote the book with Ted McKenna, Jolt
yep,
Effect.
yep,
People would rather miss out than mess
yep,
up.
yep.
But as a leader, I'd be challenging my senior executives to say, listen, it's never going to be perfect. I understand every decision is difficult, but we have to move our business forward, make a decision. What are your thoughts on that kind of? I'm not trying to be too unempathetic toward the buyers, but Mike, how does it go? How does it work on your end?
It's a very good question. And, it's interesting. The research I was doing leading up to the conversation today and just listening to Brent in the tee up, I kept mentally going back to, one of those old catchphrases about IBM from 20 years ago, right? No one was ever fired for hiring IBM or buying IBM. And the point that you made, Brent, about confidence, I mean, that
Mhm.
is just so salient to AI adoption, to workforce development, to competing in marketplaces, to launching new products, to selling all the things that Mark, you and I have talked about for, coming on 15, 16 years since we first met. I'd never really distilled it down to the two-party confidence and the ability to both present and conclude around that. But I think that's really a key point and worth sort of teasing further into because as everything speeds up, I mean, the Justin Trudeau quote we opened on, right, is the one about never again will it be this slow and it's never been this fast before. And so you sit at that junction where it feels like we're out of control in the speed that we're moving at. And yet right now is probably the slowest it's going to be headed into the future. And those inflection curves, uh, you know, AI models changing every day, the depth of reasoning that you can extract, the cost per million tokens, like these things are all levers moving so quickly around us. And I empathize with probably 99.9% of the world because I grew up in tech. I came out of tech as an AI thought person, a person who's lived my whole life in data inference, outcome, and action. Learned business second and became a leader. But you know, most of the people I speak to don't understand what's under the covers. I mean, now that it's in the cloud, you can't say they can't look at the machine and see what's inside it. But what's going on and why it's going on and how it's creating outcomes. I think that sort of triangle is really the thing that we have to unpack. But looking at it through a confidence lens, it really adds new insight to that. And so my day job, leading a firm, bringing technology to market and working in neuroscience, and this is groundbreaking work that we're sitting upon. It's very difficult to sell even to people who want to buy it. It
Mm,
involves organizational transformation in some ways in very calcified, knowledge rich environments. And so, who's the hardest person to sell to? The confident, knowledgeable expert.
yeah.
Who's the person who very often most needs to change? That same individual. And I'd just be really curious your thoughts on where does that come in? And the bonkers outcomes that data and insight and inference and all the things going on right now. How do we move that 75% either into a digital world or to better equip people with what they need in order to drop that 75% down and have people want to engage with sales more often?
I agree with you, Mike. And by the way, Mark, the sort of what it's interesting, sort of your question is so very much like Mike. I have interviewed, talked to now at this point over the years, literally tens of thousands of senior executives, and that's not a brag. It's just it's a bit of a very humble, lucky guy to be able, like
Yeah,
in
yeah.
big stages, small rooms, you name it. But there's an exercise that we came up with a number of years ago that I still run today, which is when talking to senior executives, say, let's just for a moment, because I usually it's commercial leaders I'm talking to, just take your selling or your marketing hat off for a moment and put your buying hat on and think about a purchase that you've made inside your own company in the last 12 to 18 months. Think about the people involved, the steps it took, the questions you had to answer. Now, if I were to ask you for one word, one adjective to describe that entire experience, beginning to end, what would that word be?
I like this.
And to the reason why I said tens of thousands of people is because I think it's actually telling. I've literally run that exercise on big stages, small rooms with tens of thousands of people. I've yet to hear a positive word. It's always long, hard, frustrating, awful.
How incredible, isn't it?
Right? Yeah, the
I
F
love
bomb
that in the
comes
book.
out.
I
It's
couldn't
it's
believe it.
just it's dramatic. And then I always ask, well, how much of that pain, frustration, and awfulness was the result of the company selling to you, and how much was your own company getting in its own way? And we all say the same thing. This is our own company, right? It's our committees, it's our budgets, it's our timelines, it's our competing priorities, it's
Yeah.
our personalities. It's just this is, by the way, when Silicon Valley, you think about early, what was it, Facebook or was it Google? Which either the move fast and break things, but that's kind of the sort of mantra of Silicon Valley more broadly, is because I think it's a reaction to this kind of world, right? It's like, can we please just, we've been talking in MBA classes about flattening the organization for the better part of 2 decades, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's all this sort of strong desire to get to a place where we're more agile, right? This is where agile thinking came from. It's all of this is indicative or symptomatic of the same frustration that we all have in these organizations with lots of people involved in these decisions, all working, I would argue, with good intentions, but are sometimes cross purposes of priorities, really
Yes.
struggle to come to a common vision of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so going back, Mike, to your point, like, how do I become the one seller customers do want to talk to? Well, if you can't help me with that, then I don't really see any, because I can find everything else. I'd like your value, your products, your features, your benefits, all that stuff. That's been online for, over a decade now. I don't need you for that. Right. And so as a result, I think a lot of customers think, well, if I don't need you for that and there's nothing else you provide, I don't need you for anything. And that's why 75% of B2B buyers say I don't need to talk to sales rep. But what if I could show up and actually help you with this other thing, right? Help you with it, helping you all come to a common vision, helping you anticipate obstacles that you didn't fully appreciate, helping give you a heads up, not based on my expertise, but based on other companies like you who've gone down this road and the lessons they've learned. It's like, by the way, when procurement gets involved, they're going to have these 3 questions. We see a lot of companies struggle with this. One of the ways that we can help you is to think through
Yeah.
how to answer those questions when they come up. So it's like, so as a customer, I think, I'm glad I talked to you because that was actually really helpful. That's really what Framemaking is all about, is this idea of becoming your customer's almost like decision Sherpa or buying
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah, we're throwing that term Sherpa around a lot today. So
Is that right?
we're on a lot with this 75%, of the buyer said at that point in
Yeah.
time, they prefer to make the decision with no salesperson. By the way, let folks listening think of that for a second. That's a crazy number. But later on, we talk about research done in 2018 where 77% of buyers said, I feel completely overwhelmed.
Totally.
I feel completely overwhelmed. Whether it's for the reasons you give in the book that are all great,
Yeah.
Brent, decision complexity, information overload, objective misalignment, outcome uncertainty. So we can understand why they feel overwhelmed. I'll just come back to this 2 kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
One, I think there's just this core challenge in large enterprise today, and oftentimes this is where large deals comes in. Consensus is proven not to get us to the right answer. It is. So when you go through certain, mental exercises, there's a number of things out there that say, listen, if I go for a consensus deal, I'm going to get here. If I actually go outside of consensus where all parties are not created equal and somebody makes a decision, you actually get a better decision done. The second thing I would just bring up to the conversation for a second is when we think of senior executives, they're not publicly going in front of their shareholders saying, boy, I'm overwhelmed by the complexity of
No.
this decision whether or not
Right.
to make this M&A deal. They're in front
Totally.
of their shareholders going, we're going to do this M&A deal. It's
Yeah.
going to work out perfectly. Look at how most M&A deals turn out, by the way.
Yeah.
The stats are flabbergasting. You never get the deal synergy. But
No.
it feels to me like this may be, we'll get back to the sales component of it, but I think it's a symptom of a larger problem in large corporate enterprises where, many of them are just not nimble anymore and you're trying to make decisions by consensus. In large banks, too many people are at the table influencing the decision that have no part being there.
Yeah.
Right? So, but they, it's the old Miller Hyman. They can say no, but they can't say yes. But it's just another wrench in the works.
Mark, what's interesting to me, though, first of all, by the way, there's a footnote on the consensus point, which is flying directly in the face of that argument is this idea of wisdom of crowds and the incredible success right now of prediction markets, as at least as a betting opportunity, which is all about like finding, if not consensus, at least a common sort of market clearing price of agreement. But let's park that because that's actually super interesting, and I don't have deep expertise there. But boy, is that so fascinating. What's interesting to me is that in many ways, the heart and soul of the framing sale isn't actually a selling story or a buying story. It's really a human story. Because as much as we can throw this at the feet of large corporations with lots of stakeholders, and certainly that is part of the story that exacerbates the problem. One of the stories we talk about and this comes back to the AI thing, Mike, I'd love to explore with you in a second, but is I think the same thing happens at an individual level. So in other words, it can't just be like, in other words, the answer can't be, well, let's just like reduce the number of stakeholders because you may have picked it up, Mark. One of my favorite stories in the book is a real story. Most of my stories are true, and that one is too. Is this shopping on Amazon? Like we do this as consumers,
Oh,
as
of course
individuals,
we do. Yeah,
right?
the cart,
Yeah,
500 items in
you
the
go
cart.
to Amazon and you want to buy like something simple. I did it the other day with a pair of like gym shorts, like running shorts, right? It's like, and you think, well, how hard it is. You put in I've done the story I tell in the book is a true story about a dongle. I just need a cheap little dongle to connect my phone to my, everything's USB-C now. So you go and you put the criteria into Amazon for whatever you're looking for. Amazon comes back and says, here's 1,000 choices. That's overwhelming. So then I go with Amazon's choice or recommendation because that's helpful. And then I start reading reviews. All sounds good. Right before I about to put it in the cart, I start reading these 1-star reviews. And they're like, don't buy this. It broke upon arrival. You're a chump if you do this. Well, I don't want to be a chump. So you kind of freak out and you go, let me look at the next one.
Yeah.
And like 3 hours later, you're still on Amazon shopping for what you thought was going to be a 5-minute purchase of something relatively simple. And you're getting very frustrated.
$7.99.
It's a great
Right?
example. Yeah.
Right.
It's a
And at
great
some point,
example.
I joke, but it's true. It's like after 3 hours of doing this, you don't hate Amazon because they're just you kind of hate yourself. Like, why can't I freaking make a choice? And then the punchline is there's this button on Amazon. If you press it, all the pain stops. And the button it's not buy now. Everyone says buy now. It's like, no, it's because that's the problem. Is I can't buy now because I don't know what to do. The button is save for later. And if I press save for later, I
Yeah.
don't get a dongle, but I do get my life back. Right. I was actually in South Carolina a week ago telling this story. And I always end it on the true, but it's a joke, but it's not because it's true. My wife has 582 items saved for later in her Amazon account. That's 582 purchase processes, individual ones, not company ones that stalled out. This is through indecision and overwhelmedness. And one of the sellers wrote me after the meeting, said, I checked after the meeting and I have 599 items saved for later in my Amazon account. So I've got your wife
Wow.
beat, which I thought was funny.
Wow.
But see, notice that is not a B2B corporation story. That's just like all of us as humans. It's the paradox. It's Barry Schwartz's paradox of choice. It's
Yeah.
the overwhelming amount of information. It's just the world that we live in today. And this maybe, if you'd like, we could segue to segue to AI a little bit because I think, Mike, in many ways, AI actually doesn't make this any easier. It actually it actually exacerbates a lot of these dynamics in a lot of ways. I don't know.
Let's do that, and then we're going to circle back in terms of what to do about it before we wrap. But
Sure.
for sure,
Yeah.
AI. Please, Mike, thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think really back to your point about difference in degree and difference in kind, but
Yeah.
I would actually take one step back and say, as a parent heading into 18-year-olds and you're at 20, so maybe it
Yeah.
all goes differently in the next 2 years and you can brief me on that after.
No.
I think being a parent and seeing the world, if you strive to see the world through your child's eyes,
Mhm.
you're reminded of the importance of intellectual curiosity. And I
Mhm.
think if you can see through their eyes and keep your intellectual curiosity on 11 and then bring to them the ability to be safe in their decision making, you overcome a lot of the challenges of children growing up, your authentic self at work,
Mhm.
coaching and teaching people in how to make decisions, and maybe even having confidence in that work. And so
Yeah.
the question about AI becomes, is it controlling us or are we controlling it? I mean, fundamentally, I look at it that way. I will frame it and say, I'm not a doomer. I really think that, we will be in a better world as a result of the things that are coming and happening now if we take control and push it forward. But what I really can find value in is the ability to synthesize and reason over a lot of information
Yeah,
to
totally.
show your work that's happening now through reasoning models. And so you kind of think, pulling out of 2024, we had reasoning models, we had knowledge grounding, we had the ability to start affecting outcomes. And these things all together let us see AI through not make a picture or hallucinate on something that's not helpful, but to really begin to help us understand, synthesize, make decisions, and create action. But I think the keys there are all their aids as opposed to actions.
Yeah,
And what I think
yeah.
in the shopping journey where AI will change, but it disrupts everything from brand marketing through to digital, 20 years of digital marketing and search engine optimization and everything else. If we can ask an AI product, an engine, a reasoning system or whatever, my problem is I need to get this phone hooked up to this piece. What's the dongle I need and my budget's $10?
Yeah.
What's shocking is unlike Amazon that has to try and operate a marketplace where buyers and sellers both have to be catered to, the AI is actually pretty good at telling you this is the one to get. Here's why, here's one. If you say, give me 10, tell me about 10, tell me about 20.
Yeah.
But if you say, I just want one, it's a $10 decision. My stakes are low. My desire is to get done and move on. They're more action oriented, or deterministic's not the right word, but AI can help me. Maybe I'm a different cat in the whole equation. It helps me get to action faster, not because it makes decisions for me, but because my AIs have learned through years and weeks and months and such of working together. What I
Mhm.
really need is succinct. I don't need flowering. I don't need to be buttered up. I need the 4 points to make and the steps to take action, and then we move on. And Mark and I were talking a couple weeks back about, as the AI learns your behaviors, as it personalizes and forms memories, one of the most valuable things in that relationship, and only recently did I ever see one AI saying, "Hey, bring your memories and knowledge from the other product in here."
Hmm.
That sort of who I am so the AI behaves differently with me is going to become exceptionally valuable, and possibly will start being restricted in how portable it is, because that's what separates all three of us using Chat GPT or Anthropic Claude or what have you.
Yeah.
What separates how we do it is our experience and the memory it's built about how we want it to work. Otherwise, it's the
Yeah.
same algorithm each of us uses, producing very
Agreed.
different outcomes.
It's interesting that you said synthesize because that's in many ways that's the book's called The Framemaking Sale because that's really what framemaking is this idea of synthesis, organization. How do I take some of this big and hard and overwhelming like that spaghetti bowl or like criteria, like information and just help me put a frame around it? And in many ways, one could argue that's what AI is particularly good at, as long as you trust its output, which is, I think we're kind of still there. In writing, there's a quick story. In writing the book, I wrote the book myself. I didn't write it, but I did use AI for like as a glorified thesaurus sometimes, or give me the way this, but where it was relatively early days, a couple years ago now, or a year and a half ago. But at times I'd ask it like, hey, I need, I'm too lazy to look up the Chicago manual of style format for a citation and I've got to put in the footnote. So can you, I was footnoting the Challenger sale. So just give me a footnote, Chicago style, manual style footnote for the Challenger sale, and I was going to copy and paste it. And it just spits it back, says, the Challenger sale was written 2011 by Neil Rackham and Matt Dixon. It's like, well, hold on now. That's not true. So,
Hey, let's correct that.
yeah,
Alternate history.
by the way, all due respect to Neil Rackham is brilliant and a good guy. But anyway, so enough of those kinds of things happen. You begin to doubt what you're hearing, right? So that'll assumably get fixed over time. But here's a quick story. It's not in the book because it happened after the book was published, but I tell it elsewhere. But I call it the dog food story. It's a true story. Again, it's something that happened to me after the book was out. I was, as we all are these days. At least I am. I'll raise my hand. I was on Instagram scrolling through my feed, trying to like make the world go away. Instagram's got my number because it's an algorithm, so it knows I have a rescue dog, and is making me feel guilty that I don't give my
Lovely.
rescue dog human grade dog food. So after enough ads on human grade dog food, I break down like, oh, maybe I need to be a better human being. I'm gonna get my dog human grade dog food. It was at this moment, Mike, where I decided to do sort of the thing, right? It's like, well, I'm going to use AI for this, right? I'm gonna essentially do an RFP for human grade dog food I was using Copilot. Not that it matters to your point. So as give me the 4 top vendors, the features, benefits, what's good, what's not, customer testimonials, the customer service, all the criteria that you would think in a typical RFP. Give me a straight up recommendation. And then because I'm old, it's like, can you please format it in a table format so I can print it on an actual piece of paper, right? So I did all of that. I was very proud of myself. And this is again a true story. So now I've got this table with all of these 4 criteria, the 4 providers all laid out, all these criteria, and a clear recommendation. And you look at it, it's like, yeah, I buy that. That makes sense, right? I take it out of the kitchen. I show it to my wife, explain to her what I'm doing. She looks at me, first of all, like I'm crazy, which is normal. But then once she got on board, I said, so what do you think we should do? And she looked at the table and she looked at me and she looked back at the table and said, I don't know. What do you think we should do? And keep in mind, the recommendation's right there at the bottom of the paper, very clear. It's like, so I don't know. What do you think we should do? And I said, I don't know. What do you think we should do? And we both kind of sat there and stared at this thing, stared at each other. And then she said? She said this. She said, it would be helpful if we could just talk to a couple people who have a rescue dog, who have actually bought this dog food, and just kind of get their experience from it.
Yeah.
Right? And I said, that would be amazing. That would be so helpful. And she agreed, that would be helpful. The thing is, we didn't know how to talk to other people who have rescue dogs about this. You know what we did? We took that piece of paper with the clear recommendation, set on the kitchen counter, and I bleep you not, it is still sitting there 3 months later because apparently we don't clean. And we've never taken action on it. That is essentially saved for later. And it makes me wonder, it's like, I think it is maybe true that 75% of B2B buyers don't want to talk to sellers, but I don't think it's true that 75% of B2B buyers don't want to talk to humans. And I think that's really interesting, because if we could show up as a human being and show up in a very specific way that helps them just make sense out of all this and provide not my expertise, but access to other people who have had similar experiences, which arguably I either can do or could do down the road, we could debate that. But I think for now, there's this window of opportunity for sellers to show up in this kind of manner and not only differentiate themselves from other sellers, but differentiate themselves from AI in a really powerful way. And that's why I'm excited about this work. I think this, God bless, if you're in sales, go do this. I can't guarantee success, but it's a probability story. But man, if I'm going to place a bet, I'm going all in on this. That's why the book exists.
How could it hurt? So I mean,
right, what could go wrong?
That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, but
should be the subtext of the book. What could go wrong?
But frankly, obviously they need the help.
Yeah.
Obviously they need the help, because outside of the, hey, we don't want to talk to salesperson, we know 40, 60%, as you bring up, it's going to no decision. Same thing with you and your lovely wife with, hey, what do we do about this? It just sits.
Yeah.
So mind you, by the way, again, I keep coming back from a senior executive perspective.
Yeah.
If Mike is being tasked with making a decision to improve operational efficiency in his 300-person IT group, if the pressure from on top is high enough and significant enough going, I need to see a result and you've got 12 months, Mike better make a decision on something.
It's got to do something. That's right.
You better do something. So some of this is the organization, but clearly, elevating to this level of consultative support, really you're being a consultant to the organization on how they should think about a purchase, or how do they frame the process and the learning and the expectations and the value. Can we speak a little bit, Brent, because you've got so much great content in the book on this. What are a couple of things that salespeople can take away right now in terms of thinking, how do we do this? What does that process or framework look like?
So you mentioned Matt and Ted, dear friends of mine, and they're really great books.
The Jolt Effect.
Right. And Jolt Effect is, they leaned, for all the different reasons their data pointed to, into this fear aspect to customers, or the fear of messing up, which I think is 100% true. And I think they nailed that part. And we talk about that in the book and in the later chapters.
Yeah.
But I think in a lot of ways, your biggest competitor today isn't customers' fear; it's their exhaustion, it's their resignation, it's their frustration.
Ah,
Right. So I do these weekly videos on LinkedIn where I break down the
yeah.
book and talk about it, and they come out on Thursdays usually. Which reminds me I could do one for tomorrow. But 2 weeks ago I put one out. Said I think your number one competitor today is not the competition, is not status quo, it's not indecision. I think your number one competitor today is your customer's memory.
Mm,
It's their memory not of buying. It has nothing to do with you. It's just their memory of the last time they went through a similar journey and bought something like this. So to your point, Mark, if I've got a CEO telling me you have to make a decision and you have to make it with it, then I'm going to make a freaking decision, right?
yeah.
But if you take just even a little bit of that urgency off, and all of a sudden it becomes a nice to have versus a need to have, and I'm thinking like, I got to go to that spaghetti bowl again. It's
Yeah.
just, it's not worth it. It's like, I tell this story, when this exercise, like, what's the one word you use? And just, like the CMO who said she had just bought a CRM system, and the word that she used to describe her experience of buying a CRM system, and it doesn't even matter, the vendor doesn't even matter. But her word was, I never want to do that again. And she wasn't thinking about like I bought the wrong CRM system. She was thinking like that 2 years that it took a chunk of my soul that
Yes.
frankly I don't want to have to go through again, not just with CRM, but with anything. Right.
Yes.
And that's what you're up against. So frame making is all about showing up in a way to your customers in a way that just helps them feel like I can do this. And help them make it feel easier. But because it's their confidence you have to solve for, not your confidence, there's a certain element, something none of us really have talked about in sales before, is this idea of agency. And it's like, how do I help customers
Yeah.
feel
Great.
not that I can do this, but they can do this, that it's their decision. So this is why I like the metaphor of a frame or a framework, because if I'm overwhelmed with like say 50 different steps or 50 different attributes or 50 different pieces of information, my opportunity, I won't say my role, but my opportunity as a seller isn't say, oh, here's the one you need. Because we actually know from the sense making work that actually does damage when you just show up and tell them what to do. It actually does damage to their self-confidence because it's like, well, now I trust you, maybe. I don't trust me, and I got to trust me. So frame making is this idea of what if I just put a boundary around that based on evidence and social proof from other people like you, not my opinion, but other people gone down this road. What we've seemed to collectively have learned is, notice my language, we seem to have learned is not I know this thing, right? It's a
Mhm.
posture of humility. It's a posture of empathy. We're learning together. It seems to work as if we take this thing, and it seems to be that all these 50 things are maybe important, but these three matter the most based on what we've learned from it. So I've put a boundary around it. And now you still have the freedom, of course, to say, well, I think it's actually these four things, not these three things. Or it's, yeah, those three things, but these two are the ones that matter. So I'm leaving you the agency to make your decision. But now I've done it inside of a boundary that feels much more manageable. And as part of that, I may prompt. This is the other, it's prompting and bounding. So prompting, I mean, say, by the way, there's one question that seems to get overlooked a lot. So I can prompt you to put another thing into the frame that you might have not thought of otherwise, which becomes helpful and valuable because I'm helping you think through things using social proof that you never thought of.
Yeah.
All of that, dude. Now, there's a very specific answer to a very specific question. All that gets wrapped up in a very so tactical. Like, what can I do? So we lay this out in a number of different ways in the book. In our workshops that we're running on this now, this is where like the vast majority of time in our workshops is spent on this because it's turned out to be so interesting and people get really fired up about it. But we talk in the book about something called the phrase that pays. And I regret that language in the sense has been changed. So anyone that comes in buys a newer version of the book, it'll be now called the phrase that frames. And so this is how we talk about the phrase
Mm.
that frames, because I think this is better branding. But the phrase that frames is this phrase, it doesn't have to be, it's not rote, it doesn't have to be memorized, it's not a script, but it's a posture. And the posture of the phrase that frames is something like, in working with other companies like you, one of the things we've been surprised to learn is, and I can apply that to things. So one of the things we've been surprised to learn about
It's
outcome, about
great.
decision complexity. One of the things we've learned about, information overload. As in other words, I could take this phrase that frames and apply it to any one of those challenges, but
Yeah.
it's based on social proof. It's not what I think, but what we learned. It's based on humility. One of the things we've been surprised to learn is, so I'm co-learning with you. It's got one of the things that we found is it comes down to these three things. So I can prompt and bound in it. And so when we unpack all of this, what we actually wind up in our workshops is geeking out on language, which is my
Mm.
background going way back to before I did any of what I'm doing now. I was a linguistics professor and a German professor. And so for me, this is like putting on an old sweatshirt, just like geeking out on language. And I did a workshop in South Carolina, I think I mentioned already 2 weeks ago, where we were practicing versions of the phrase that frames against an obstacle that the team had identified that their customers run into. And they were providing advice via the phrase that frames. And as they were practicing, one of the members of the team said, one of the things that we find, working with other customers like you, one of the things we find is really hard is, and I said, just say the word really twice. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And the whole room looked like, what is he even doing? But he did it. And he said, one of the things we find working with our customers like you, one of the things we find really, really hard is, and the whole room looked at me and said, what did you just do? And I said, I didn't do anything. I said, well, yeah, but why did that sound so different? And I said, well, just because you said really twice? It's like, no, because when you leaned into the second really, he was really conveying a certain emotion and he made an emotional connection. Right.
Mm.
And this is the kind of stuff we're working with now, because the whole idea of like, how confident am I ask the right questions? How confident am I that I've done sufficient research? None of those things are things you can know. Those are things you have to feel. So we actually have to convey framing in a way that's solving for customers feeling and not just customers knowing,
Mhm.
and specifically feeling about themselves. And it's not so the lesson here is not, oh, I need to say really twice. That is not the lesson. That would be a rote script. But the lesson here is, the lesson here is that word choice, intonation, word language of emotion, these are all things we explore in chapter 7 of the book, turn out to be some of your superpowers that are completely overlooked by most sellers, and your star performers are crushing this and they don't even realize they're doing it. And because what you're doing through all that is you're not making a sales connection, you're making a human connection. This is like literally, I joke that the Framemaking sale is a dating book dressed up as a sales book, right? Because the same stuff works in making a connection. I'm connecting to you not because you're my customer and I'm being customer centric. I'm connecting to you because we're all human beings and this stuff is hard. And we're
I'm
just
trying to
trying to
help
figure it
you.
out together, right? That's it.
Yeah, my job's passion, insight, knowledge, all energy, enthusiasm, belief in what you're talking about.
Totally. And experience from others like you. And this, Mike, by the way, I'm on AI bandwagon to some degree. I'm a little bit more skeptical than some, maybe, and I'm also a little bit of a Luddite, and I'm old. But anyway, I think at least for now, these kinds of things I'm talking about provide at least a current window of opportunity to differentiate yourself from AI. Right? These are the kinds
Oh,
of
for sure.
right, because the question is like, what can I still bring to the table as a seller? I can't just bring
Tons,
information. I
tons.
can't, right? I can't just bring
Yeah.
prompting or frameworks in an abstract sense, but I can bring frameworks and advice and guidance in a way that's designed to help you feel differently. That's something AI can't do, at least yet. So that's
Yeah.
what I get excited about this.
I mean, I don't know that I would even end that sentence with yet, because
Maybe ever. I don't know. Yeah.
they're much like you're in your, go to a wood shop, use some good tools, build something, rub your hand over it at the end and realize that you made that.
Yeah.
And the tools help you, and a well-stocked, woodworking shop, you can probably do things that you can't do with a poorly stocked one, or a
Yeah.
sharp axe cuts more firewood. But at the end of the day, we're serving our mutual needs. We're not serving the machine's needs. And I think, there was a little while where the AI models that were out in the generative AI world, the chatbots, they became very sycophantic and quite willing to seem like they were your buddy and all the rest.
Totally.
There were some very conscious moves made, and I applaud the big providers for making those choices to step back and get the machines to be a lot less I'm your buddy and a lot more here's what I think, or well, not think, here's the facts and
Right.
the positioning. And it was funny because I was preparing for our conversation today and pulling a bunch of stuff together and getting a summary. And at the end, I was working with the new Copilot reasoning system, which uses two opposing models to work out to the conclusion that it arrives at.
Oh,
And at the end, I just said, thanks, that was great, period, return. The old, in case they do take over, always be nice to Siri and what have you, right?
interesting.
But so a simple thank you. And because it was two models that were reasoning against each other, and there's this whole narrative that gets displayed up on the screen as the models are working through, what did
Hmm.
you mean? What did you say? How do I respond? What is the other model thinking in? It went into a bit of a tailspin trying to figure out how to tell me it was great that we worked together on this problem without sounding friendly, or that it was thinking, or it had emotions. It was spilling all this out in front of me. Well, we don't have emotions, so we can't say we felt good about working with you. And you could see this whole set of
It's
things
fascinating.
trying to get to not being what it's not, but to really being what it is, which is to say, hey, I get you, human. You're saying thank you. I'm going to just say you're welcome and move on. We're not quite there, but we're a
Yeah.
lot further ahead than a 4-page sycophantic thing about how, gratitude is so important and blah, blah, blah. So it's coming. I don't think we're ever going to get to where we're not in the center, because otherwise it's just machines serving machines. And then
Yeah.
we're, in that doomer place that I don't think we're ever going to get to.
Well, that's a whole different podcast and probably a different guest. My friend Don Scheibenreif over at Gardner writes about this, which is the customer algorithm. So basically, there is a scenario where algorithms are buying and selling, right? And then the role of humans doesn't go away; it just changes pretty dramatically. This book is not written for that reality, but that's also a super interesting reality. Is when your refrigerator orders milk from the grocery store and there's no humans involved at all. But we're not there yet either, particularly for large, complex B2B purchases. But
Where
there you
we
go.
are, though.
Yeah.
Where we are, this book.
Where are we, Mark?
This book is super
Bring
helpful.
us home.
This book is super. So, team, the book is The Framemaking Sales: Sell More by Boosting Customer Confidence. It's written by Brent Adamson and his pal Carl Schmidt.
Yep.
First of all, Brent, thanks a million for joining us today. It's
Totally.
great to
Are
see
you
you
kidding?
again.
Let's do it
Super
again.
Fun. We'll do it again for sure. How did these folks learn more about you and learn more about the book?
The book has its own website, theframemakingsale.com. So that's the easiest place to find it. I tend to live and breathe on LinkedIn. So I post weekly there, weekly sort of 5-minute videos, sort of here's breaking down a lot of these stories and things like that. The name of our company is A to B Insight, which also has a website. For those who are Challenger aficionados, particularly Challenger customer, you'll know the reference of A to B. And if not, that's okay. But that's the so it's Brent at A to B, the letter A, T-O, letter B, insight, singular.com. But that's just find me on LinkedIn. That was too hard. Just reach out on LinkedIn. That's the easiest place to find me.
Team, we're going to make it super easy. All those links are going to be in the show notes for today. Brent, thanks a million for joining. It's always great to see you and learn from you. Mike Sparling, great to see you again. And thank you for joining and bringing that AI filter for today. How do people engage with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, I'm like Brent, LinkedIn. Look me up. I probably don't post every week, but that's where I am. I'll reply to any messages that come through, anything I can add value to. And hey, Brent, I just want to say it's just such an honor to have met you today.
Oh,
Spent
thank you.
the time that we did, and I look forward to continuing dialogue and seeing where things go. And good luck with your 20-year-old. You're breaking the ground ahead of me.
Well, Mike, I didn't tell you about the 15-year-old. That's where things get real. The thing is, she locked herself in a room 2 years ago. I haven't seen her 2 years, but I think she's still up there. I'm not sure with them.
And we'll edit that out too, Sandra.
Oh, that's the best part of the podcast.
Yeah.
Come on, this is good material.
Let's maintain some family calmness.
Oh, Mark
the
wants
way-
decorum. All right.
Team, thank you so much for joining the Selling Well podcast today. If you enjoyed today's conversation as much as we did, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast, because that's actually how we get great guests like Brent and like Mike. If you think there's a way we can improve this podcast, please let us know that too. So my email address is markcox@inthefunnel.com. We love constructive criticism, and we respond to every piece of advice we get. So send us your notes, send us your ideas. We love being direct. And by the way, we're going to send a note. That note you get back comes from me. In the meantime, keep your ideas coming to us, team. Keep selling well and helping clients achieve important desired business outcomes. And we'll see you next time on the Selling Well podcast.